My name is Philip, a 58-year-old construction company owner who worked my way up from nothing. I raised my only daughter Melissa alone after my beloved wife passed when our little girl was just 8. We were always close through all the hard times, and I never stopped supporting her, even after she married Darian. This morning I received a text that punched me in the gut. "Dad, you're banned from our Italian vacation. Darian says family only." This after I'd contributed $95,000 to their house down payment. As I stared at my phone, my chest tightened with confusion and pain. Where are you watching from today? Go ahead and hit subscribe to join me on this journey of betrayal boundaries and the tough lessons that can ultimately heal broken family bonds. Growing up in central Michigan, I learned the construction trade from my father. But unlike him, I had bigger ambitions. After high school, I took night classes in business while working construction during the day. By 25, I had started my own small company. It wasn't much at first, just me and 2 other guys taking on renovation projects. But I was determined, worked 7 days a week, and slowly built a reputation for quality and reliability. I met Angela at a friend's barbecue when I was 27. She was a kindergarten teacher with a smile that lit up the room. We married within a year, and Melissa came along 2 years later. Those early years were tight financially, but they were the happiest of my life. My business was growing, and coming home to Angela, and little Melissa made all the hard work worthwhile. We bought a modest 3-bedroom house, and I spent weekends fixing it up while Angela turned it into a home. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday when Melissa was 8. Angela was driving home from the grocery store when another driver crossed the center line. The police said she died instantly. I still remember standing in our kitchen holding Melissa as she cried, wondering how we would ever move forward. The first year was a fog of grief and adjustment. I had to learn to be both mother and father to Melissa while keeping my business afloat. There were nights I sat at the kitchen table after Melissa was asleep going through bills and contracts with red eyes wondering if I could handle it all. But giving up wasn't an option. Melissa needed me. Despite running a growing company, I never missed a parent-teacher conference or soccer game. I learned to braid hair, helped with science projects, and made sure dinner was on the table every night, even if it was just spaghetti again. When Melissa had nightmares, I'd sit by her bed until she fell back asleep, sometimes dozing in the chair until morning. As the years passed, my company expanded from residential renovations to commercial construction. The increased income allowed me to move us to a better neighborhood with excellent schools. I wanted Melissa to have every advantage to make up somehow for the loss of her mother. Maybe I overcompensated, but seeing her thrive made every sacrifice worthwhile. By the time Melissa was in high school, we had our rhythm. Sunday breakfasts were our special time, chocolate chip pancakes, and planning the week ahead. She was a straight-A student captain of the debate team and popular without being superficial. I couldn't have been prouder. When college acceptance letters arrived, Melissa had her pick of schools. She chose Northwestern, expensive, but I had been saving since she was a baby. I told her not to worry about student loans. "Focus on your studies," I said. "I've got this." And I did, though it meant postponing the expansion of my business and working longer hours. During college, Melissa blossomed. She majored in communications with a minor in business marketing. Our Sunday breakfast tradition continued via video calls, and she came home for every holiday. She graduated with honors, and watching her walk across that stage, I knew Angela would have been just as proud as I was. After college, Melissa landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm in Chicago. I helped her find an apartment and get settled. Though I missed having her closer to home, I was happy to see her building her own life. We still talked several times a week, and she came home at least once a month. 5 years ago, when Melissa was 27, she called with excitement in her voice. "Dad, I've met someone. His name is Darian, and I want you to meet him." The following weekend, they drove up from Chicago. Darian was tall, well-dressed, and articulate. He worked as a marketing executive for a financial services company. His handshake was firm, his smile confident. He complimented my home and asked thoughtful questions about my business. He seemed to make Melissa happy, and that was what mattered most to me. "What do you think of him?" Melissa asked, after Darian stepped outside to take a call. "He seems like a good man," I said. And I meant it. Though something about his polished demeanor made me slightly uneasy, I dismissed it as the natural wariness of a father. As their relationship progressed, I noticed subtle changes in Melissa. She began wearing more expensive clothes, talking about exclusive restaurants, and mentioning friends who worked at prestigious firms. When I teased her about a designer purse, she laughed it off. Darian says appearance matters in his circle. I didn't love the implication, but I kept my concerns to myself. 3 years ago, Darian proposed with a diamond ring that must have cost 3 months of his salary. Melissa called me immediately, bubbling with joy. Of course I was happy for her, even as I realized our relationship would inevitably change. When it came time to discuss wedding plans, I was surprised by the scale Melissa and Darian envisioned. The venue alone was $30,000. "I'll cover it," I said, though the total eventually reached $75,000. What struck me as odd was that Darian's parents, who I learned came from considerable wealth, contributed only token amounts. When I mentioned this to Melissa, she quickly changed the subject. The wedding was beautiful, if more lavish than I would have chosen. During my toast, I choked up speaking about how proud Angela would have been. I noticed Darian's mother whispering to another guest when I mentioned my late wife's job as a teacher. It was the first of many small moments that made me feel my working-class background was somehow embarrassing to my new in-laws. After the honeymoon, Melissa and Darian settled into a luxury apartment in downtown Chicago. Our regular calls became less frequent. Sunday video breakfasts were often canceled due to brunches with Darian's colleagues or friends. I tried not to take it personally. This was natural as she built her married life. What wasn't natural was the growing sense that I was somehow being evaluated and found wanting by my daughter's new family. Still, I focused on the positive. My business continued to thrive despite economic downturns. I was approaching a point where I could consider scaling back, perhaps taking more time to travel and enjoy the fruits of decades of hard work. I hoped that might include spending more time with Melissa and perhaps eventually grandchildren. About 18 months ago, Melissa and Darian asked to meet for dinner while they were in town. They seemed tense throughout the meal, and finally over dessert, they shared their frustration about the housing market. "We've been looking in Lake Forest," Melissa explained, referring to one of Chicago's most exclusive suburbs. "But even with our combined income, the down payment would clean out our savings." "We found the perfect place," Darian added. 5 bedrooms, 3-car garage, great schools for when we start a family, but it's just out of reach. I didn't need the subtle hints. "I could help with the down payment," I offered immediately. "Maybe $50,000. Would that make the difference?" I watched Darian and Melissa exchange glances. "That would be amazing, Dad," Melissa said. "But honestly, the market is so competitive. To make our offer stand out, we'd need closer to 20% down." After some quick mental math based on the neighborhood they were describing, I realized they were asking for substantially more. "How much are we talking about?" Darian cleared his throat. "The house is $1.2 million. We have about $150,000 saved, with property taxes and closing costs. I could do $95,000, I said, surprising myself with the figure. "Interest-free loan, of course. You can pay me back when you're able." The relief and excitement on Melissa's face made it worthwhile. We spent the rest of dinner discussing payment terms, though Melissa seemed uncomfortable with my insistence on putting everything in writing. "Dad, we're family. Is all this paperwork really necessary? It's just good business," I explained. Keeps everything clear and avoids misunderstandings down the road. My attorney had always advised documenting financial transactions, even with family. Maybe especially with family. We agreed on modest monthly payments over 15 years, with provisions for deferment in case of financial hardship. I had my lawyer draw up the paperwork, and within a month, Melissa and Darian had their dream home. I felt good, knowing I'd helped them start this new chapter. The house was indeed beautiful, a stately colonial on a tree-lined street. Beyond the down payment, I found myself contributing in other ways. I offered to furnish the home office since they both worked remotely several days a week. That was another $8,000 for custom-built shelving and ergonomic furniture. When they mentioned wanting to landscape the backyard, I connected them with one of my contractors and covered the $12,000 bill as a housewarming gift. The housewarming party should have been a joyful occasion, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. Darian's colleagues from the financial sector clustered together, discussing vacation homes and private schools. Darian's parents held court in the living room, accepting compliments on their son's beautiful home, as if they had provided it. When someone asked directly who had helped with the down payment, Melissa quickly changed the subject. I noticed other troubling patterns in the months that followed. The agreed-upon monthly payments to me were frequently late, always with plausible excuses. The property tax bill was higher than expected. We had to replace the water heater. Darian's car needed repairs. Meanwhile, their social media showed expensive dinners weekends in New York and brand new furniture. I didn't begrudge them their lifestyle, but the contrast between their apparent financial constraints and visible spending was difficult to ignore. Darian's father owned shares in several investment firms, and he introduced me to a colleague looking for construction partners on a commercial development. The project seemed promising, but during negotiations, I realized they expected substantial concessions because of our family connection. I maintained my standard rates, which led to a cooling in relations with Darian's father. Throughout this period, I maintained meticulous records of all financial transactions with Melissa and Darian. It was simply how I'd always operated in business. Every loan payment, every gift, every expense covered, all documented with dates and amounts. I didn't think I'd ever need this information, but old habits die hard. By the 1-year mark, they had repaid less than $5,000 of the loan. When I gently raised the issue during a visit, Melissa seemed annoyed. "Things are tight right now, Dad. Darian's expecting a bonus next quarter. Can we not talk about money today? It's so stressful." I backed off immediately. The last thing I wanted was to be a source of stress in my daughter's life. "Of course, honey. No rush. Family first, always." What I didn't realize then was how one-sided our definition of family had become. Over the past year, I noticed our relationship cooling in subtle but unmistakable ways. Melissa's calls became less frequent and shorter. Our once weekly conversations dwindled to brief monthly check-ins. When I called, she often seemed distracted or in a hurry. Visits became increasingly formal affairs. "Let us know when you're coming, Dad," Melissa would say. "We're so busy these days." Gone were the days of spontaneous drop-ins with homemade lasagna or Sunday morning coffee. Everything needed to be scheduled, and often rescheduled. I watched Melissa transform under Darian's influence. The daughter who once wore jeans and sweaters now discussed designer labels. She developed opinions on wine vintages and contemporary art that seemed rehearsed rather than genuine. During one dinner, she corrected my pronunciation of a French dish in front of Darian with an embarrassed smile. Determined to bridge this growing gap, I made efforts to fit into their world. I bought nicer clothes for visits to their home, researched wine basics, and updated my wardrobe with the help of a personal shopper at Nordstrom. I wanted Melissa to feel proud to introduce me to their friends, not embarrassed by my working-class background. Despite these efforts, I sensed my presence was becoming an inconvenience rather than a joy. At a dinner party they hosted, I overheard Darian explaining to a friend that my construction business was actually quite successful, in a tone that suggested surprise. Later that evening, Melissa subtly steered me away from a conversation about politics with Darian's colleagues, as if she didn't trust what I might say. Traditional family celebrations began shifting to Darian's family's events. "We're doing Thanksgiving with Darian's parents this year," Melissa would explain. "Maybe we can do lunch the weekend after. Christmas Eve, which had always been our special time together since Angela died, was now spent at the Anderson family gathering. I was occasionally invited, but felt like an afterthought. My house, once filled with Melissa's laughter and energy, grew quieter. I considered downsizing, but couldn't bring myself to sell the home where we had so many memories. Instead, I threw myself into work, taking on projects I might have delegated in the past. My management team noticed. "You're working like a man half your age," my operations director commented. "Everything okay?" I assured him it was. One Sunday afternoon, I decided to surprise them with Angela's famous pot roast. I'd spent the morning cooking, remembering how Melissa always said it was her favorite comfort food. When I arrived unannounced, the annoyance on their faces was unmistakable. "Dad, we were just heading out to meet friends for brunch," Melissa said, not inviting me inside. "I should have called." I apologized, handing over the still-warm Dutch oven. "Just thought you might enjoy this. Your mom's recipe." "Thanks," she said, taking it awkwardly. "We'll enjoy it tomorrow." As I turned to leave, I overheard Darian whisper, "This is exactly what I was talking about." The door closed before I could hear Melissa's response. Later that week, while picking up a check from Darian's father's business partner, I overheard a conversation in the next room. Darian's voice was unmistakable. "Philip's a nice guy, but very new money. Doesn't quite understand how things work in our circle." I left without confronting him, the check feeling heavy in my pocket. Melissa's expressions of love and gratitude, once so natural and frequent, became perfunctory. Birthday calls were brief. Father's Day cards seemed generic. The emotional connection that had sustained us through the hardest times of our lives was fraying, and I couldn't understand why. It was during this period that I first heard mention of an Italian vacation. Melissa called to reschedule our monthly dinner, saying they were busy planning a trip. "Italy." "That sounds wonderful," I said, genuinely excited for them. "I've always wanted to visit. My grandfather came from Sicily, you know." "Yes, I remember," Melissa said. "It should be fun. Darian's been several times with his family." "When are you going? What parts are you visiting?" I asked, thinking of the guidebooks I could send, perhaps some Italian phrases I could learn to share with her. "Still working out the details," she said vaguely. "Listen, Dad, I need to run. Can we do dinner next month instead?" Over the following weeks, I noticed social media posts about trip planning, including a photo of Melissa with Darian's mother looking at Italian leather goods for our trip. When I asked about their itinerary during our rescheduled dinner, Melissa was evasive. "It's still coming together. Darian's mom is handling most of the arrangements." I tried to hide my disappointment at not being included in the conversation. "Well, if you want any company, you know I'm just a phone call away. I could meet you for part of the trip. Been saving my frequent flyer miles for something special." Melissa exchanged a quick glance with Darian. "That's sweet, Dad. But I think this trip is pretty set with who's going." She quickly changed the subject to a new restaurant they had tried. I left that dinner with an uneasy feeling that I couldn't quite place. It would be several weeks before I understood why. The text arrived at 9:17 on a Tuesday morning. I was in my office reviewing bids for a new commercial project when my phone buzzed. Seeing Melissa's name, I smiled and opened the message, expecting perhaps a lunch invitation or update on their lives. "Dad, I need to tell you something about our Italy trip. Darian says it's family only, so you won't be able to join us. His parents are covering most expenses and invited his sisters and their husbands. I hope you understand." I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the message. Family only. The words seemed to float off the screen, carrying a weight that settled in my chest like concrete. I wasn't considered family. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I tried to formulate a response. Nothing seemed adequate. I pressed the call button instead, needing to hear her voice to understand what was happening. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again 10 minutes later, then again at lunch. Each time, straight to voicemail. I sent a simple text. "Can we talk about this?" No response. By mid-afternoon, concern had turned to hurt, then to a slow building anger. I opened Instagram and found Darian's profile, usually restricted, but occasionally visible through Melissa's tagged photos. There it was, a post from earlier that morning showing Darian, Melissa, and his parents meeting with a luxury tour consultant, planning their exclusive family tour of Italy's finest destinations. The 2-week itinerary included private vineyard tours, cooking classes with renowned chefs, and stays in historic villas. The trip wasn't just a casual vacation. It was an elaborate, expensive excursion with Darian's entire family. Everyone except me. I scrolled through comments and found one from Darian's sister. "So excited for our family adventure. Mom and Dad are the best for organizing this." Melissa had responded with heart emojis. My next discovery hit even harder. Checking our joint account, an old account I'd maintained to help Melissa with emergencies since college, I found a $5,000 withdrawal labeled Italy Trip Deposit. An account I still funded was being used for a trip I was explicitly told I couldn't join because I wasn't family. I closed my office door, something I rarely did, and sat in silence. My secretary knocked gently after an hour. "Philip, your 3 o'clock is here. Are you all right? Reschedule, please," I managed to say. "Family emergency." Alone again, I found myself calculating. The $95,000 house down payment, the monthly subsidies for property taxes, the furniture, the landscaping, the car repairs I'd covered just last month, the wedding, the college education, the thousands of breakfasts, lunches, and dinners over 24 years of single parenthood, the soccer games in the rain, the nights sitting beside her bed during illnesses, the school plays, the driving lessons, the heartbreaks, the celebrations. "Family only," she had texted, as if I were a casual acquaintance. I tried to rationalize her behavior. This was Darian's influence, surely, or perhaps a phase of asserting independence. Maybe she felt caught between loyalties and made a poor choice. I'd raised her better than this, hadn't I? That night I barely slept. The phrase "family only" repeated in my mind like a cruel taunt. By morning, I knew something fundamental had changed. The relationship I thought we had, one of mutual respect and appreciation, had been revealed as something else entirely. I pulled out my records of financial support, the interest-free loan agreement for the house showing less than $7,000 repaid of the $95,000 principal after 18 months, the direct deposits I still made to our joint account, the credit card I maintained for her emergencies that now showed charges for luxury brands and expensive restaurants. After a lifetime of putting Melissa first, her needs, her happiness, her future, I was being treated as an ATM rather than a father. It wasn't about the money itself. It was what the money represented, years of sacrifice and love that now seemed entirely unappreciated. I called my attorney, Frank, who had been my friend since we were both starting our careers. "I need to discuss some options regarding Melissa's house," I said. Something wrong? He asked, hearing the strain in my voice. You could say that. I need to know where I stand legally with the loan agreement. By afternoon, I was sitting in Frank's office reviewing documents. You were smart to document everything, he said. The agreement is clear about payment terms and consequences of default. What are my options? Several, he said, outlining them methodically. Given the payment history, you could declare them in default now if you wanted to. The agreement gives you the right to demand full payment or secure your interest with a claim on the property. I nodded, absorbing the information. And if I wanted to, I paused, the words difficult to speak, exercise those rights. Frank studied me for a moment. Are you sure about this, Philip? This isn't just a legal decision. I'm aware, I said quietly, but I need to know my options. After meeting with Frank, I scheduled appointments with my financial advisor and real estate attorney. This wasn't a decision I was making emotionally, though emotion had certainly triggered it. This would be a calculated business decision, the kind I'd been making successfully for 30 years. My financial advisor, Janet, spread out the documentation of my support to Melissa and Darian. Even without the house down payment, you've provided over $120,000 in direct support since their marriage, she confirmed. Plus the intangibles, connections, referrals, expertise. And the loan terms, I asked. They've defaulted by any standard definition, she said. The payment schedule hasn't been met for 10 consecutive months. You've been extremely generous in not enforcing the terms. Next came the meeting with David, my real estate attorney. He reviewed the loan agreement carefully. This is solid, he said. The default remedies are clearly spelled out. You have the right to demand full payment of the outstanding balance, and if they can't pay, you can place a lien on the property and force a sale. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of what I was considering. If I decide to go that route, what exactly would the process look like? David outlined 3 specific actions. First, canceling all automatic payments and financial support. Second, formally declaring the loan in default with demand for full repayment. And third, initiating the process to list the property for sale if repayment wasn't received within the specified time frame. How quickly could this happen? I asked. The notification of default can go out today. The demand for payment would give them 30 days to respond. If they don't, we could have the property listed within 6 weeks. I nodded slowly. And the current market in their neighborhood, very strong. Inventory is low. A house like that could sell quickly, possibly above asking price. The businessman in me recognized the logic. The father in me was in turmoil. I spent that evening alone on my deck, thinking about what this decision would mean, not just for Melissa and Darian, but for our relationship going forward. Would this permanently damage any chance of reconciliation? Or was this the wake-up call needed to reset our relationship on healthier terms? By morning, I had made my decision. I called Frank, Janet, and David to set the plan in motion. First, I canceled all automatic transfers to our joint account and removed my name from it, entirely transferring my portion to my personal account. Next, I authorized Frank to send the formal notice of default demanding payment of the outstanding $88,000 within 30 days. Finally, I met with Patricia, a realtor who specialized in luxury properties. The market's hot right now, she confirmed. We could list it as coming soon, even before we have full legal clearance to sell, generate some interest. Do it, I said, signing the listing agreement. But hold the active listing until I give the final go-ahead. Within 48 hours, everything was in motion. The legal notices were sent via certified mail to their home address. The property was flagged as coming soon in the real estate database. My financial separation was complete. And then I waited. I knew that stopping the automatic deposits would trigger a notification from their bank. I knew the certified letters would arrive within days, I knew Patricia would begin generating interest in the property immediately. I didn't reach out to Melissa. This wasn't about negotiation anymore. This was about consequences. The first offer on the house came just one day after Patricia listed it as coming soon. A couple relocating from New York who were willing to pay 10% above asking price for a quick cash transaction. I told Patricia to note their interest, but hold off on formal negotiations. 3 days after the financial separation, my phone rang. It was Melissa. I let it go to voicemail, needing to prepare mentally for the conversation. Her message was panicked. "Dad, something's wrong with the joint account. The transfer didn't come through, and the bank says you've removed your name. Call me ASAP." An hour later, she called again. This time her tone had changed from concerned to angry. "Dad, what's going on?" "We just got some legal letter about being in default on the house loan. This isn't funny. Call me back right now." I took a deep breath and called Frank. "They've received the notices. Melissa's called twice but hasn't mentioned the property listing yet." "How do you want to handle the conversation when you do speak with her?" he asked. "Calmly," I said. "This isn't about revenge. It's about establishing boundaries and consequences. Do you want me on the call with you?" I considered it. "No. This needs to be between Melissa and me first, but stay close to your phone." I prepared notes for the conversation, determined to stay factual and unemotional. Just as I was reviewing them, my phone rang again. It was Darian's number. "Philip, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Darian's voice was sharp, dispensing with any pretense of respect. "Hello, Darian. I assume you've received the default notice." My voice remained steady. "This is ridiculous. You can't just demand $88,000 out of nowhere. And what's this about our house being listed for sale? Are you out of your mind?" "I'm enforcing the terms of an agreement that you and Melissa signed. The monthly payments haven't been made as promised for nearly a year. We've been busy. Things have been tight. You know how it is with property taxes and maintenance. You can't seriously expect—" "Darian, put Melissa on the phone, please." I cut him off firmly. There was muffled conversation. Then Melissa's voice came through a mixture of anger and panic. "Dad, we're in Italy. Do you know how embarrassing this is? We just got a call from our neighbor saying someone was taking pictures of our house for a listing. I thought family vacations were important to you," I said quietly. "That's what your text said. Right, family only." There was a moment of silence. "That's what this is about. You're doing all this because you're mad about not being invited on vacation." "No, Melissa. I'm doing this because I've come to realize our relationship has become purely transactional. I provide financial support, and you tolerate my presence when convenient. That's not family. That's not fair. We've been busy and you've been busy spending $5,000 from our joint account on a vacation I was explicitly told I couldn't join because I'm not family. The same account I fund. The same family I've supported through every stage of your life." I heard Darian in the background. "Let me handle this." Then his voice came through clearly. "Philip, you're overreacting. Melissa didn't mean anything by that text. It was just poor wording. Of course you're family." "Interesting. So when she wrote, 'Darian says family only,' that was just poor wording. When the trip was planned for 2 weeks with your parents' sisters and their spouses, but not me, that was an oversight. Look, my parents organized this trip. They were covering most expenses. It wasn't our place to add people to the guest list. Yet you had no problem using money from an account I fund to pay your portion," I noted. "And speaking of money, shall we discuss the loan agreement you've been ignoring?" Melissa came back on the line, her voice breaking. "Dad, please don't do this. We can't come up with $88,000 right now, and we can't lose our house. You should have thought about that before treating our agreement so casually, before treating me so casually. We'll be better about the payments. We promise. Please just call off whatever you're doing." I'm afraid it's not that simple anymore. I kept my voice even. Actions have consequences, Melissa. You and Darian chose to prioritize luxury trips and social climbing over honoring commitments and maintaining relationships. Now you're facing the results of those choices. There was a commotion on their end, and suddenly I heard Darian's father's voice. "Philip, this is Richard Anderson. What exactly do you think you're accomplishing with these theatrics?" "Hello, Richard. This isn't theater, it's business. Something I'd expect you to understand. This is hardly the way civilized people handle family matters," he said, condescendingly. "We should discuss this reasonably when everyone returns from Italy." Interesting perspective from someone who's contributed so little to your son's financial well-being, despite your resources. Tell me, what percentage of their house did you provide? What percentage of their wedding? College education? There was an uncomfortable silence. Our financial arrangements with our son are private, as are the consequences of defaulting on a legally binding agreement, I replied. Though I should mention there's an all-cash offer on the house already, 10% above asking price. I heard gasps and frantic whispering. Melissa came back on the line. "Dad, please, we'll cut the vacation short. We'll come home and figure this out. Just please stop the sale process." "I'm open to discussing terms when you return," I said. "But understand this, our relationship going forward will be different. I will no longer be your personal bank while being treated as an embarrassing afterthought." "That's not fair. We've never thought of you that way." Her voice cracked with emotion. "Your actions suggest otherwise, Melissa. Family only. Remember." Darian took the phone again. "This is extortion. We could fight this in court." "You're welcome to try," I said calmly. "The agreement is clear, your default is documented, and my attorney is excellent. But litigation would only guarantee that the house is sold to satisfy the judgment." "You would do this to your own daughter over a vacation?" His voice was incredulous. "This isn't about a vacation, Darian. It's about respect, appreciation, and honesty. Something has been broken in our relationship for some time. The vacation was simply when I finally acknowledged it." Melissa was crying in the background. "Dad, please, we'll make it right. We'll include you in everything going forward." "This isn't about inclusion, Melissa. It's about sincerity. I don't want to be invited places out of fear of financial repercussions. That's not a relationship. It's coercion." "What do you want from us?" Darian asked, his tone finally losing its edge. "I want what any parent wants. Genuine appreciation, respect, honesty. If that's not possible, then I at least want the business arrangements between us to be honored." The call ended with promises to return immediately from Italy and meet to resolve the situation. After hanging up, I sat in my quiet living room, emotionally drained, but strangely at peace. My brother called shortly after having heard from Melissa. "You really put the house up for sale?" he asked, amazement in his voice. "Yes." "About time you stood up for yourself," he said after a pause. "She's been taking advantage for years." As difficult as this confrontation had been, I realized it was long overdue. Sometimes love requires drawing clear boundaries. Sometimes respect must be taught through consequences when words have failed. That evening, Patricia called to inform me a second offer had come in even higher than the first. "The market's crazy right now," she said. "We could start a bidding war if you want." "Let's wait," I told her. "I have a feeling we'll be having some important conversations very soon." In the quiet of my home, I made another decision. I would donate a portion of whatever proceeds came from this situation to a scholarship fund for fatherless children. Something positive should come from this painful lesson. Melissa and Darian cut their Italian vacation short, flying home 3 days after our phone conversation. They arrived at my house unannounced, still carrying the jet lag and tension of their interrupted trip. When I opened the door, Darian immediately began with accusations. "You had no right to embarrass us like this. Do you know how awkward it was, explaining to everyone why we had to leave early?" I remained calm. "Come in. We should talk inside." They followed me to the dining room where I had prepared folders containing all the documentation of our financial relationship. Loan agreements, payment records, bank statements, text messages, emails, everything meticulously organized. "Before we discuss anything else," I said, "I want to establish the facts." I opened the first folder. "This is the loan agreement you both signed 18 months ago. It clearly outlines payment terms and consequences of default." Melissa looked uncomfortable. Darian crossed his arms defensively. "This folder contains payment records. In 18 months, you've repaid less than $7,000 of the $95,000 principal. There have been no payments at all in 4 of those months." "We explained about tight months," Melissa interjected. "You said it was fine. I was accommodating because you're my daughter and I wanted to help. But accommodation is not the same as permission to disregard the agreement entirely." I opened another folder. "These are records of additional financial support beyond the loan. Furniture, landscaping, car repairs, direct deposits to the joint account." Darian shifted uncomfortably. "What's your point?" "That you've been generous. We never denied that." "My point is that this relationship has become fundamentally imbalanced. I provide financial support while being treated as a known outsider." "That's not true," Melissa protested. "You're always welcome." "Am I?" I interrupted, opening another folder. "These are screenshots of social media posts about family gatherings I wasn't invited to. Holidays that were suddenly just for Darian's family. And finally, explicit confirmation that I'm not considered family when it comes to your Italian vacation." Melissa looked away. Her face flushed. Darian attempted to maintain his composure, but was clearly rattled by the methodical presentation. "We never meant to hurt you," Melissa said quietly. "Intent doesn't diminish impact," I replied. "But what concerns me more is the pattern. The consistent prioritization of Darian's family friends and social connections over our relationship. The embarrassment you seem to feel about my background. That's not," Melissa began, but stopped when I opened yet another folder. "These are transcripts of conversations where Darian referred to me as new money, and you laughed, Melissa. Where my construction background was described as embarrassing. Where my presence at social functions was discussed as something to manage." Darian's face hardened. "You've been spying on us." "No. People talk, Darian. Your social circle isn't as discreet as you think. And Chicago's construction industry is smaller than you might imagine." At this point, Richard and Eleanor Anderson arrived, having been called by Darian. They entered with the confidence of people accustomed to controlling situations through presence and wealth. "Philip, surely we can resolve this without resorting to such drastic measures," Richard began in his boardroom voice. I remained seated, gesturing to the empty chairs. "Please join us. I was just reviewing the documented history of financial support I've provided to Melissa and Darian." Eleanor frowned. "Is that really necessary? Keeping score seems so transactional." "I agree," I said. "Relationships shouldn't be transactional. Yet here we are. I provide financial support, and in return, I'm excluded from family-only vacations." Richard attempted to take control. "Look, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding about the Italy trip. It was primarily a gift from us to our children. A gift partially funded from an account I maintain," I noted. "But the vacation is merely a symptom of a larger issue." I pulled out one final piece of evidence, a photo album. I opened it to show pictures of myself working construction sites when Melissa was young. Saturdays spent on job sites while she did homework in my truck. Late nights reviewing contracts after helping with her school projects. "This is what I did to put you through college without debt, Melissa. 60-hour weeks for years. No vacations, no luxury cars, Every extra dollar went to your education fund." Melissa's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the photos. For perhaps the first time in years, she was truly seeing me, not as an 8 or an embarrassing working-class father, but as the man who had sacrificed everything for her future. "Dad, her voice broke. "I never meant to make you feel unappreciated." Darian looked uncomfortable, but remained silent, his earlier hostility deflated by the physical evidence of my decades of sacrifice. "I believe you," I said gently. "But intentions aside, that's exactly what happened. And it can't continue." Richard cleared his throat. "What exactly are you proposing as a solution here?" "Two paths forward," I said firmly. 1. You repay the outstanding loan immediately. We terminate all ongoing financial support, and we rebuild our relationship from scratch on more equal footing. "And the second option?" Eleanor asked. "We restructure the loan with strict enforcement of terms, implement immediate changes to how we interact as a family, and establish clear boundaries around respect and inclusion." Melissa looked at Darian, who was studying the financial documents with new seriousness. "We can't repay $88,000 right now," she admitted. "Then we move to option 2, I said, starting with some non-negotiable terms. What followed was a difficult but necessary negotiation. Richard and Eleanor initially tried to position themselves as mediators, but quickly realized I was approaching this with the same business acumen that had built my company. The terms we eventually agreed upon included a revised payment schedule with real consequences for missed payments. Mandatory weekly dinners at my house without Darian, initially to rebuild my relationship with Melissa. Family counseling sessions to address the underlying dynamics, and a complete financial separation beyond the existing loan. Darian resisted these terms initially, particularly the weekly dinners without him. "This feels like punishment," he complained. "It's rehabilitation," I corrected him. "You've had 3 years to influence how Melissa relates to me. Now, I need time to rebuild what's been damaged." As our marathon negotiation session wound down, Melissa asked for a moment alone with me. When the others had stepped outside, she broke down completely. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she sobbed. "I got caught up in all of it. The status, the social climbing. I forgot who I am and where I came from." It's when I held her as she cried, remembering the little girl who had faced her mother's death with the same open-hearted emotion. "We'll figure this out," I promised. "But things have to change." She nodded against my shoulder. "I know, and they will." The following weeks were a period of adjustment and healing. The weekly dinners began awkwardly, but gradually returned to something resembling our old, comfortable relationship. Melissa started arriving early and staying late, sometimes helping me with projects around the house like she used to as a teenager. During our third dinner, she made a confession. "Darian's been pushing me to ask you to back off on the loan terms. His parents offered to help if you would be reasonable." "And what did you say?" I asked carefully. "I told him no, that you were right about consequences and responsibility." She looked down at her plate. "I also told him I'm not sure our values align anymore." This was the first hint that my stand had caused her to reevaluate not just our relationship, but her marriage as well. I didn't press the issue, knowing she needed to reach her own conclusions. The family counseling sessions revealed patterns none of us had fully acknowledged. Melissa's insecurities about social class, my tendency to use financial support as a substitute for establishing healthy boundaries, Darian's family's subtle reinforcement of class distinctions. 6 months later, the loan payments were coming in regularly. Our relationship had improved dramatically. Melissa had started joining me for community service projects I'd become involved with, mentoring young people interested in construction trades. Most significantly, Melissa had moved into my guest house, having separated from Darian. "I don't recognize who I became with him," she told me one evening. All the things that used to matter to me, helping others, authenticity, family, got replaced with appearances and status. People change, relationships evolve, I said. The important thing is recognizing when something isn't healthy and having the courage to address it. I learned that from you. She smiled. Better late than never. We were discussing the possibility of Melissa joining my company, perhaps developing a community outreach division. Her marketing background, combined with renewed appreciation for the construction industry, made her uniquely qualified. By the 1-year mark after that fateful text message, much had changed. Melissa was divorced and living in a modest apartment she paid for entirely herself, a point of pride for her. She had joined my company and was thriving in her new role. Our Sunday breakfast tradition had been reinstated now, often, including planning for the business week ahead. That Thanksgiving, as we sat at my dining table with my brother's family and several friends who had become like family, I felt profound gratitude for the difficult but necessary stand I had taken. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is establishing boundaries that allow relationships to be rebuilt on healthier foundations. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took your generosity for granted? How did you balance love with self-respect? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding the courage to stand up for yourself while keeping your heart open to reconciliation. Remember, true family is built on mutual respect and appreciation, not just shared DNA or financial support. Thank you for listening, and may your own family relationships be blessed with honesty, respect, and genuine connection.